Now we're on Daf Tzadi Gimel Amid Beis. Ella says, Rabbi Chia, why do I need this pasuk and this derivation from Lamad Tilmad Liras Hashem Elokech Kol Hayomim regarding Shabbosos and Yomim Tovim? Lav, shouldn't we assume Ki Hai Gavna, that the Brisa is coming to be matir, to be torem, for the sake of Onik Shabbos on a davar shelo b'ol yom. Notice l'chatchila, we want you to be mekayim the mitzvah of hafrasha on a davar shelo b'ol yom. But for the sake of Onik Shabbos, the Torah is teaching you that you can fall back on a b'di'evid kind of hafrasha, on hafrasha shel davar shelo b'ol yom. Amalei, so Rabbi Yanai says to Rabbi Chia, v'akaryun b'chalma, I had a dream, and I heard a voice calling out to me in a dream, quoting a pasuk. What did he hear in the dream? These two words, Kane Ratzutz. Now, the words Kane Ratzutz, if you do a word search, today we can do it on the computer, appear in two different contexts. One's in Malachim Beis, and the other is in Yeshayahu Hanavi, Perik Mem Beis. And when Rav Yanai heard these two words in the dream, and he had this dream apparently on the night of Shabbos, he thought, my love, Hachi Kamerli, this is what is being called out to me. A pasuk in Malachim, Hine batachti lecha al mishenes hakada rotzutz hazeh. Kind of ruts. It's like a broken bench. If you're going to sit down on a broken bench, I don't know what's going to happen to you. It's certainly not a secure place to sit. That's called a kind of ruts. So therefore, this heter that you, Rav Chia, are allowing me to be mafresh from Vadai Tevel onto Tevel that I haven't even received yet, it's a davar shelo b'ol olam, that's a kind of rutzitz. So it's interesting how the Talmud has a claim against his Rebbe and the psak that he got from his Rebbe because of a dream that he had. But in any event, Rabbi Chia bounces back and says, no, Rabbi Yana, you misinterpreted the dream. The voice that called out to you, kind of rutzitz, was referring to Hachi Kamalcha, to a different pasuk in Yeshayahu Hanavi, Kana Ratzitz lo yishma. A Kana Ratzitz will not be broken. Upishta kea lo yichabena. And at the end of the pasuk it says, Li emes yotzi mishpat. Meaning that the din is a din emes. They were showing you that what I said was mutter is a powerful kanaratzitz. It's an amud. It's like a pillar that won't be broken because the din is a din emes. Okay, now we go up the ladder again to Rebbe. Because Rav Nachman Yitzchak said that Rebbe also holds Adam Maknid Davar Shelo b'ol olam. Kidisanya, as we learned in a brisa, based on a pasuk in Parshas Ki Teitei, Lo Sazgir Eved El Adonov, which sounds like it means that you're not allowed to be mukshabed your eved after you freed him. Says Rebbe, that can't be pshat in the pasuk. If you freed him already, then you're not talking about an eved. It says tazgir lo tazgir eved. It must be before you were meshacher him. Ella, but rather, what are we talking about? Below teach eved al manas l'shacher o akosim medamer. Ruvain owns an Eved, Shimon is buying the Eved, and he makes a declaration that he's buying the Eved in such a way that he will free the Eved. And the Torah now has to clarify that the Adon who's buying this Eved is not allowed to be Mishabi the Eved because the Eved is already Meshuchrar, he's already freed from his enslavery immediately, simultaneously with the Kinyan. When the Lekicha of the Eved is Chal, then the Shichur is Chal. And therefore the Torah says, Al tazk lo tazkir eved ladona. Hechi dami, Omer Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, tiksav, tikosav le, the person who's being Meshacher, the Eved, writes a Shtar Shichrur, and in the Shtar Shichrur it says, L'shekachech, tachech, when I will buy this Eved, meaning you as an Eved, then Harei atzmacha koni l'cha me'achshav. You have been koni yourself in a Shichrur from now. And this Shtar Shichrur is valid, according to Rebbe. And you see clearly that Adam Makna Davar Shalom Oliola. So he's Meshachrer, and the Shichr is Chal even before he purchased the Eved. It doesn't even own the Eved. It's Chal from the time he's Meshachrer the Eved, even though he doesn't own the Eved. It's a Davar Shalom Oliola. And now we go all the way up to the top of the list. Let me just make sure this is the top of the list. No. We're not up to the top of the list. We're only up to Rabbi Meir. And then after Rabbi Meir, we have to get Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, and finally Rabbi Akiva. Disnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Omer le'isha, a man gives kesef to a woman to marry her, and he says to her, he's a god, and he wants the kedusha to be chal after his gerus, or he talks to a non-Jewish woman, and he says, this is your kedusha li'achar shetis gairi. It'll be chal after you convert. Or alternatively, li'achar sheshtachrer, li'achar shetishtacheru. Another possibility is li'achar sheyomus bailech. He's marrying a married woman. He's being mekadesh a married woman, and the kedusha bichal after your husband dies. Another case is he's married to Rachel, and he's mekadesh Leah, and he says that this kedusha to Leah should be chali achar shetomos achosech, after Rachel, my wife, dies. Another example, li achar sheyachlot tzla Yevamot. He's mekadesh her, and she's Yevamot l'shuk, and the kedusha bichal after the chalitza. And in all these cases, the Tanakama of this Mishnah is going to paskin eino mekudeshes, because eino the maknid davar shelo b'olam. He's not yet been miskayer. She has not yet been miskayer. He hasn't freed her, and therefore she's not a Jewess. And her husband hasn't died yet, so how can he be mekadesh her? And his wife, her sister, hasn't died yet, or the chalitza to the Yevamot hasn't yet taken place. It's a davar she'eino shelo b'olam. Rabbi Meir Omer mekudeshes. Rabbi Meir holds that Adam maknid davar shelo b'olam. It's mind-boggling. Just imagine the case. A man comes to a shiksa and he marries her with a Maisa Kiddushin. I don't know if there was a Rav Hamasadar Kiddushin, two Eidim.
Right.
They took the I forgot, what was the place where your son got married? I watched it on Zoom. That
In
wedding.
Toronto?
What?
Oh, in Toronto.
Yeah. What was that place? It was like a really beautiful place. I remember I kept screaming at you and you couldn't hear me.
I know. I don't remember what that. I don't remember what that was called.
The girl is a shiksa. Or worse than that, he's a shakens. The Pella. Adam maknid davar shelo b'olam, according to Rabbi Meir. Now we go up the ladder to Rabbi Meir's Rebbe, and that's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Tisanya, this is a case of Truma, and the law is that Truma has to be from Tolush. You cannot be mafresh from Mechubar. Or if you have Tolush, you can't be mafresh onto Mechubar. And the man made a declaration, and he said that these fruits, which are still attached to the ground, they have not yet been harvested, will become truma when I harvest them. Or another alternative, he's got peiros tlushim, and he declares that these peiros tlushim should be truma onto peros aruga that are still attached to the ground, lichshe yitlishu, dvarim kayomim. This is valid. Yes, Arakain, even a bigger chiddush, Omar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Afilu im Omar peros arugazu tlushim yutrumal peros arugazu mechubarim. He declares that the peros that are tlushim should be truma on peros of another aruga, another row, which are mechubarim. Mechubarim here means more than the fact that they haven't been harvested yet. They didn't even reach the barest minimum of maturity. They're below shlish of gidulah. There's not even a chiyuv truma here. Oh, peros arugazu, mechubarim. These peros that are still growing, they haven't even reached shlish. And you can't make them into truma. They should be truma al peros arugazu tlushim. L'ksheyaviu shlish v'yitlishu. So now there's a double davar shalom poliom. Number one, it hasn't reached shlish. And number two, it's before tlisha, it's mechubarim l'karka. Heviu shlish v'nitlishu dvarim kayamim. From the time they reach a shlish and he disconnected them from the ground, the truma is chal. So you see that even if at the time of the Afrash's truma, he didn't even have peros for truma that were uyim litrom, his truma is truma when that peros will come into chiyuv. Or even if the time he was mafresh, the peros on which he was mafresh, on behalf of which he was mafresh, were not uyim lekach, his truma is truma. So we see that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds Adam Makne Dover Shalom Olam. And now we finally get to the end of the train ride. Rabbi Akiva. Tisnan, we have a Mishnah Ksubis. A woman says to her husband, this is where we swing all the way back, full swing to the sugya that we started with. Onam Shani Osab Lafi. My Maisi Adayim that I will produce in the future should be a konam. So she took a neder on a davar shalom olam. The Tanakama says, "Ein tzarich lahafer." The neder is not chal. She cannot prohibit unto him that which is non-existent. Rabbi Akiva says, "Yafer, this neder is valid. It needs hafara. Shemetadif olav yesim in aroila." Although there's a shibud up to a certain point that she cannot prohibit that which she's meshubet him on in a konam, but beyond that, which is called hadafa, that she can do. And we see here that Rabbi Akiva holds adam makne davar shalom oliola. Now, in the Mishnah, they told the woman that your husband and your son died. And after this testimony came through, Bezdin said to her, you have the green light to get remarried. She is not she's not relying on a clear-cut heter because, as we'll soon see, there was only one witness who testified in this case. But nevertheless, she did a maisa based on this Horas Bezdin. And the assumption was that first her husband died, and only subsequently our son died, and therefore she doesn't fall for Yibum. But in truth, somehow, we'll see exactly how, we clarify that that's not what happened. And what really happened was that her son died first, and then her husband died, which means that she fell for Yibum. So if she got married to someone else, that's an illegitimate marriage. Boy, minei Rav Sheshes, the Bnei Yeshiva asked Rav Sheshes, Eid echad b'Yevamot mahu. What's the status of a single aid. Normally the Torah says, Al Pishnayim Eidim Yakum Dover. But here, one witness came to testify about a Yevamot, and this is a woman that we don't know that she has any children, and he testifies, this single aid, Mace Bila, that her husband died. And therefore, since we assume she has no children, she needs Yibum. Mao, do we rely on the testimony of this one single aid, and we're going to allow her to be misyabem to her brother-in-law, to Eishes Ach, which again, if the testimony is not true, she has violated an Isur Karis of Ervas Eishes Ach. And the Bnei Yeshiva think that that should be okay, because if you don't rely on the testimony of one aide who testifies that her husband died, then you get into a problem called the igun. Very often a woman can't get remarried because there's only one aide, one witness to testify that her husband died. So therefore they made a takana to rely on the testimony of one aide. And shall we, that's the suffix in the Gemara, shall we apply this halacha mishum igun to rely on eid echad even in a case of yibum? And what we're going to do is we're going to rely on what's called isha daika uminsava. That before she gets married, she's going to check things out. She's going to do a thorough investigation. So, for example, if a married woman, they testify with one aide that her husband died, she'll clarify that her husband died. Or in this case, that the aide echad testifies that meis bailach, and therefore you fall for yibum because she has no sons. And here's the analysis of the suffix. Shall we say that time of the aide echad, the reason why the halacha relies on the testimony of one witness who testifies meis bailach, that your husband died, is because it's a milsa davidi ligluye and lo mishakri inshi. A person would not lie about something that's ultimately going to be clarified. If he's indeed alive and the witness is perjuring himself, what's the word? Perjury, right?
Perjury, perjury.
Lying, perjuries.
Yeah, perjuring himself. Yeah.
Then we'll find out about him. You know, the so-called harug is going to walk into Bezdin and say, "I'm still alive."
Right.
And if that be the case, hachanami here too, if a witness testifies that your husband died and therefore you fall for yibum, once again, lo mashaka, the witness is not going to lie, because if he's lying and her husband is really alive, he's going to come in alive on 2 feet, and it's a davar she a milsa davili legluya. Of course, she might not be doing such a good job in investigating whether he's telling the truth, but nevertheless, the main reason why we accept the testimony of one aide in the case of meis bailach is because the milsa davili legluya, that should apply equally well to the case of a Yevamot, when the aide testifies that her husband died. Oh, Dilma, shall we say no? The main reason why the Chachama will trust one aide, time of the aide echad, mishum de'i daiko mitzvah. We can rely on her to go out and investigate before she gets married, and determine beyond the shadow of a doubt that her husband is dead. But hacha, here in the case of Yibum, it's a little bit tricky. Why? Keva de Zimnin, on certain occasions, Rachamole, she has a love, so to speak, for the Yavam. Again, I don't know if it's a romantic love or a friendship kind of a love, but over the course of who knows how many decades of marriage, she got to know her brother-in-law, her husband's brother, and she actually cares for him. Is therefore lo daiku mitzvah. If she has one aid to rely on, and Bezdin will accept the testimony of the aid, and she can now fall for yibum to her brother-in-law, she's very happy about that.
Right.
As strange as that sounds. So we won't be able to clarify that the testimony of the Eid Echad is absolutely true, because that credibility is based on Daiku Mitzvah, which we might not have in the case of Yevamot. Amalahu Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes responds to the Bnei Yeshiva. To Nisua, we have it in our Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Amru La, right? A woman whose husband and son went out to Medina Sayyam, and now they tell her, Meis B'nech, that first your son died, and then Akach Meis Bailech, the terrible tragedy. I always think of Bella Harbor, in Florida there, and it's a terrible tragedy. And we don't know who died first. No, we know who died first. We were there at the scene of the accident, and we know that your son died first. So according to the testimony that she receives, she falls for Yibu, V'nisyabma. The Achakach Amrula. There was another pair of Eidim. Again, we're going to analyze why do we rely on the second pair of Eidim. That's going to be the Claire here of Rav Sheshes. Chiluf Advar. The exact opposite took place. First, your husband died, and then your son died. Which means that now she was illegally married to her brother-in-law, which is an Isakar Sevacious Ach, is Teitze. She has to get divorced from the Yavam, from her brother-in-law, Vavlad, and the child, Rishon, the Achron, Mamzer. The child, Rishon, means before they reversed the testimony, they mistakenly relied on the first witness, and she had a Vlad. And then Achron, if she now knows exactly what the mistake was, and she refuses to break up her marriage with the second husband, in this case the Yavam, then the child from that marriage is a Mamzer. Because now we know the truth that the son was the last to die. And there is no Yibum. Hechi Damin. So Rav Sheshes analyzes the Mishnah. What's exactly the case? Ilema Trey Utrey. If there are two witnesses that testified that her son died first and then her husband. Now two witnesses come in and say, no, it was just the reverse. Your husband died first and then your son died. Is my chazes the samkas ahani spochahani? Why do you say that we have to break up the marriage and there's mamzerus and everything else, relying now on the second pair of Eidim? Why the second pair of Eidim superior and more reliable than the first pair of Eidim? Diod, and furthermore, mamzer, how can you even tell me that the child from the second husband, meaning from the Yavam, the brother-in-law, is a mamzer? In worst case scenario, Suffolk mamzer. We can't be a vade mamzer because it's trey. We don't know which pair of Eidim to believe. Maybe you'll say that the Mishnah wasn't precise when it used the word mamzer. Maybe the word mamzer meant Suffolk mamzer. For midik tani seifa, in the seifa, in the case of a woman who was told that her husband died, and she went ahead and got remarried, and then they testified that her husband was alive at the time that she got married. And it says there, have rishon mamzer fe ha'akron eno mamzer. Shmamino dafka ketanu. We see that the Tana was very medagdik. He was keen on differentiating between a Vadei Mamzer and a Suffolk Mamzer. So if you see the word Mamzer in this Mishnah, you know it means a Vadei Mamzer. Now, why is it that the Rishon is a Mamzer? Because she was remarried before her husband died. But the Achron, the Vlad, Achron, was based on the second Edus, the last Edus, which we don't know if it's true or not, but it's after her husband died, and therefore he's not a mamzer. Ella, says Rav Sheshes, lav shmamina, shouldn't we assume by process of elimination that the case in the Mishnah was bechad, that first you had only one witness, we accepted the testimony of that one witness, we allowed her to marry the Yavam with Yibum, and then two Eidim came afterwards, and they rejected and contradicted the Eidus of Eid Echad, testifying that first the husband died and then the son died. And therefore, Teitzei min Yavam vavlad mimenu richav yachma mamzer vada. And Rav Sheshes now is medayik. The reason why we accept the second pair of Eidim is Taima Mishum Diasu Beit Tre V'Akheshua. The second pair of Eidim completely trumps the first Eid because it's two Eidim against one Eid. Halav Hachi. But in a case where there were no two Eidim who came to be Machish the first Eid, Meheman, we would believe him to say that the son died first, and only afterwards the husband died, and therefore she falls for Yibum, and we're going to allow her to be Misyabek. Ika Diamri, now we have another Lishna. It wasn't on a case of, the question that came up to Rav Sheshes was not a case where the aide testified that she is Zekuka Liyavam, Holoti Boilach, the Afilu I Nami Mehema. She herself would be believed to say and testify that her husband died in a case where she doesn't have any sons. This Snan Isha Sha'amra, she comes to Bezdin and she testifies. Mace Bailey is then, if there are no children that we know of, if we know of children that she had, and therefore she doesn't fall for Yibum, Tinase. However, Mace Bailey, if she says, my husband died, and we don't know of any children that she has, Tisyame. So therefore, if she's believed to testify that her husband died, how much more so an Eid Echad would be believed? So let's go back to the drawing board. What was the question that was raised by the Bnei Yeshiva? Kiti Boilach, Eid Echad lemishrei Yevama li alma. Would an Eid Echad be believed to be matir Yevama l'shuk, meaning to marry anyone she wants to? In other words, let's say we know that her husband died without children. She falls for Yibum to the Yavam, and the aide testifies that the Yavam is dead. Can we rely on the Eid Echad? And now, since there's no longer Yavam alive, she can simply marry any man she wants. Or, in another scenario, a woman whose husband with her son went out to Medina Sayyam, and the Eid Echad is made that first her husband died, afterwards her son died, and in both these cases, the din is different based on the Divrei Eid. What changes in terms of her status? She doesn't fall for Yibum. Either she doesn't fall for Yibum because the Eid Echad testifies that the Yavam himself died, or she doesn't fall for Yibum because the aide testifies that her husband died first and her son died second.
Right.
So again, this suffix depends upon the reason why. What was the reason why the Chachamim believed one Echad, one witness who testifies about an Ashes each, that her husband died? If the Iker Tam is because, but for a reason that would apply to Eid Echad, who says that she's not Skukal Yavam. So Huadin, we're going to say that he's believed. And what is that reasoning? My time of Eid Echad, why is he believed to say that her husband died and she could get married. Mishum de milsa avili legluya lo mishaker. Here also, there's a milsa davili legluya. Right? It's very easy to clarify whether this actually happened or not, as the aide testified, and therefore we could believe him. Hachinami lo mishaker dilma time of the aide echad mishum de I daiko mitzvah veha lo daiko mitzvah. And why wouldn't she be medayik and mitzvah? Right? She's not going to clarify with an investigation that the Yavam died or that her husband died first before the child. The misnahu disanyale, because she may have it in against this Yavam. She knows the Yavam from Kadmis Danan, and she wants to get out of the Yibum. She hates him. And therefore, it's good news when she finds out from the Eidecha that her husband died first and then her son, because now she doesn't have to fall for Yibum to the brother. Or it's good news if the Eidecha testifies about a woman whose husband died and she has children. If she has children,
there's no Yibum.
Then there's no Yibum.
Right.
Wait just 1 second. I just want to make sure I got the case right. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And the Eidechad is testifying that the Yavam died. That's what I forgot. So if the Yavam died, then there's no Yibum and she can marry anyone. So she's not locked in to marry the brother-in-law. And the second case was where the Eid says that first your husband died, then your son died, and therefore there's no Yibum. Okay, then. So we got up to Tzadi Dalid, Amud Aleph, on the top of the Yom. Take this opportunity to wish you a great day.
Yeah, thank you. Have a very nice Chag Sameach.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much. Regards.
Okay.